Welcome to the deep dive. Lots of you asked us to take a closer look at the Wing Rack digital mixer, so that's exactly what we're doing today.
That's right.
We've got the quick start guide here, and really our mission is to unpack its main features, give you a clear idea of what it does without getting totally bogged down in, every single detail.
Absolutely. And maybe before we even get into what it can do, it's probably smart to cover how to use it safely. The guide kicks things off with some really important warnings.
Yeah, safety first. Always. The guide uses those bold symbols, the exclamation points, to flag risks like electric shock, but also just general operating instructions you need to know.
Right, the essentials.
And one thing that jumped out at me right away was about speaker cables. It specifically says only use professional grade ones.
Yeah, the 6.35 mil mono jacks or the locking type.
Exactly. Seems like there's no wiggle room there. And anything more complex, like installations or mods, leave it to the pros, the qualified people.
It really is non-negotiable with this kind of gear. Using the right cables. That's about secure connections, preventing electrical problems.
Makes sense.
And the warning about qualified folks doing mods, that's standard. You don't want to break it, or worse, create a hazard.
Definitely not.
And beyond those immediate warnings, there are also some, general usage guidelines, things to keep it running well and safely long-term.
Right. It's not just plug and play. They mention using only specific carts or stands.
Which makes total sense. You need it stable, especially if you're moving it.
Yeah, they explicitly warn about moving a cart with the unit on it. Tipping hazard. Can you imagine?
Oof, no thanks. And it's also just good practice. Disconnect it during storms.
Power surges.
Or if you're not going to use it for a while.
Yeah.
Simple stuff. And again, any servicing, especially if it's damaged, get a qualified tech.
Always a smart move with Pro Audio. Now, a couple of other points. Grounding. If it has that protective terminal, it must connect to an outlet with a protective ground. That's basic safety. And if the power plug is how you disconnect it in a hurry, make sure you can actually reach it easily.
Exactly. No digging behind racks when something goes wrong. Easy access is key.
Right.
The guide also says don't stick it in tight spaces like enclosed shelves. It needs to breathe.
Ventilation.
Yep, and definitely no open flames anywhere near it. Kind of obvious, but worth saying.
For sure. And they give an operating temp range too. 5 to 45 Celsius.
Or 41 to 113 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Good to know if you're working in different climates, hot stages, or cold rooms.
Definitely. They also say check the bottom housing first before you even set it up for electrical and safety info.
Always worth a quick look. Be thorough.
And then the usual reminders. Keep away from water, unless it's an outdoor model, obviously.
Right.
Clean it only with a dry cloth. Don't block those vents we talked about. Install it like the manufacturer says. Protect the power cord, especially at the ends.
Don't want any damage there.
Avoid putting it near heat sources. Don't defeat safety plugs like grounding pins.
They're there for a reason.
And stick to manufacturer-recommended accessories. Ensures things work right and stay safe.
Absolutely. All fundamental stuff, really, for keeping any electronic gear safe and sound. So that covers the safety basics. Now, shall we dive into what the Wing Line rank actually is?
Okay, let's do it. The overview section describes it as having this control section optimized for quick access. Mute, solo, fader levels for all channels. That sounds really handy.
It is, especially live. You need those controls right there, instantly. No menu diving for the basics.
Right.
The overview also mentions mute groups, custom controls, and transport controls for the USB and Wing Live player are all there too. Kind of centralizes the stuff you grab most often.
And it sounds like the home screens for buses, mains, or matrices have a similar layout to the input channels.
Yeah, visually consistent, which helps. But importantly, no gate block on those screens.
Yep.
And the level adjustment is just trim. Suggests a different focus compared to inputs, where you might need more dynamics control up front.
So buses and mains are more about overall levels at that point in the chain. Trim makes sense for fine adjustments.
Precisely. And another key thing on the INPUT screen is setting bus sends pre or post fader.
Yes, the classic distinction. Crucial stuff.
Absolutely fundamental for how you handle monitor mixes versus effects sends or subgroups.
Right. Pre-fader for monitors, so the performer's mix stays constant regardless of the main fader.
Exactly. They need that consistent level in their ears.
Yeah. And post-fader for effects, usually, so the amount of reverb follows the channel's level in the main mix, or for subgroups.
Yep. You typically want the subgroup level to reflect the combined level of the channels feeding it.
Okay. That gives us a good feel for the basic layout and controls. What about some specific features, like recording?
Good place to start. It actually has standalone recorders built in, USB and SD card options.
Accessible from icons on the main display, right? Saw those in the guide.
That's them, little icons at the top.
So the USB recorder, it can do up to 4 channels, straight to a flash drive on the front panel.
Yeah, super handy for grabbing a quick recording, rehearsals, maybe a stereo mix, plus a couple of room mics, that kind of thing.
Nice. And how do you tell it what to record?
You assign the signals in the routing screen. There's a specific recorder output group in the output section. You just patch what you want there.
Okay, so you have control over those 4 tracks, and then there's the Wing Live SD recorder. That sounds more heavy-duty.
It is. They can handle up to 64 channels.
Wow, 64!
Yep, 32 per card, using 2 SD cards in the expansion slot. That's serious multi-track capability.
Definitely enough for a full band or larger event recording.
For sure. Ideal for capturing everything for a proper mix down later.
Yeah.
And just like the USB, signal assignment is done in routing.
Same place.
Well, similar concept. There's a dedicated WLEF REC output group in the output GUI section for the SD card recorder.
Got it. Dedicated routing for both. The flexibility is great. Okay, let's talk routing in general. How does audio get around inside this thing? The guide says it's really flexible.
It really is. The basic idea is any source can go to any channel or any physical output.
Any source. So physical inputs, internal buses.
Anything. And you can set this up in 2 main places. Either the main routing screen for the big picture,
Okay.
or right on the channel itself in the IMPT section on the home screen for more focused adjustments.
So you can see the whole map or just zoom in on one channel's input. That sounds efficient. The guide mentions the channel input menu controls main or alternate input config. They call it an inline console concept.
Right. What that means, practically, is each channel effectively has 2 inputs ready to go, a main and an alternate.
Oh.
You can switch between them digitally, instantly, no repatching needed. Think of it like having a built-in backup input or an easy way to A/B compare 2 mics on the same source, maybe.
Ah, I see. That's clever. Very useful for flexibility or redundancy.
Definitely.
And the routing screen itself. Left side shows inputs and auxes, right side shows available sources.
Yep. You click a channel on the left, then pick its source from the list on the right.
And there's a source group drop-down menu to help sort through all the options.
Exactly. Especially if you have stage boxes connected, the source list can get long. That menu helps you filter by physical inputs, ADS-50, internal buses, user signals, etc. Keeps it organized.
Makes sense. It sounds pretty visual and logical. Now, beyond standard analog inputs, what digital connections does it offer? The guide mentions the AES-3.
Yes, AES-3, or ACBU as it's often called, standard XLR connectors for stereo digital audio in and out. Professional standard.
Gotcha. And for connecting things like stage boxes, AES-50.
Correct. AES-50 is the high channel count digital snake protocol it uses. Really important here. The guide stresses using shielded TAN-T 5E cables.
Shielded, right.
And specifically with Ethercon terminations, those ragged locking connectors you see on Pro gear.
Built for the road.
Exactly. And there's a max cable length to 80 meters for AES-50 runs.
Good to know the specifics. Then there's Stage Connect. That sounds different. Using standard XLR cables.
It is. Stage Connect is designed for shorter runs, maybe to a side rack or across the stage. It sends up to 32 channels, in and out, over regular balanced XLR mic cables.
Wow, just standard XLRs. That's super convenient.
It is. Very cost-effective and uses cables everyone already has. It runs at 44.1 or 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, and the latency is tiny, sub-millisecond. Really efficient.
So quite a few ways to get audio in and out physically, but it's not just about external inputs, is it? There are internal sources, too.
That's right. Beyond the plugs on the back, you have internal things you can use as sources. User signals, user patches, and oscillators.
Oscillators versus test stones.
Yep, 2 infinite ones. Sine wave, pink noise, white noise. You can route them anywhere. Channels, outputs. Invaluable for setup, testing, troubleshooting.
Standard toolkit stuff. Very useful. Okay, what about user signals?
You get 24 of these. Think of them as virtual taps. You can grab audio from almost anywhere inside the mixer. Inputs, auxes, buses, mains, matrices.
Tap points?
Yeah, and you can choose pre-fader or post-fader taps, and left, right, or mono sum of the signal. Once you've defined these 24 user signals, they become available as sources themselves in the routing menu, so you can route that tapped signal somewhere else. Really flexible for custom monitor feeds or complex processing chains.
So it's like creating 24 custom internal patch points. That sounds powerful. And user patches. How are they different?
User patches are also about creating sources, but their special trick is combining 2 raw input signals into a stereo or mid-side pair.
Combining two signals.
Yes, and critically, these signals don't have to be from the same physical input group or even next to each other. You could take, say, an XLR input and combine it with an AES-50 input channel to make a stereo source inside the wing.
Whoa. Okay, so you can build custom stereo pairs from disparate inputs. The guide mentions things like applying different gain or phantom power to just one side.
Exactly. Or combining inputs from different interfaces.
Yeah.
Or maybe making a mid-side pair from two mics that aren't physically adjacent. It gives you really granular control before the signal even hits a channel strip proper.
That's fascinating. Where do you find these user patches?
They show up in the USR Signals source group, listed as USR 25 through 48. You select one as a source, then you configure which two actual inputs feed it. You can set them up as mono, stereo, or mid-side.
Really opens up some creative possibilities at the input stage.
Okay.
That covers inputs and sources pretty well. Let's talk about mixing. Buses and matrices, 16 stereo buses and 4 stereo mains.
Correct. The 16 stereo buses are your main workhorses for internal routing. Typical uses are effects sends.
Like sending to a reverb.
Exactly. Or monitor mixes for musicians on stage.
Crucial for live sound.
And also for subgroup processing.
Yeah.
Grouping all your drums together onto one bus for overall EQ or compression, for instance.
Right. Treating a set of channels as one unit. Where can these buses send their output?
They're pretty flexible. They can feed the 4 stereo main buses, obviously. They can also feed the first 8 buses of their own group, allowing for cascading setups. And they can feed the 8 matrix buses.
Okay. And the 4 main buses, where do they typically go?
Their role is simpler. They usually feed the matrix buses or go directly to physical outputs. They are, your main stereo mix output in most cases.
Got it. Final stage before the speakers, usually. Now, these 8 matrix buses, full processing, route anywhere. Sounds powerful.
They are very powerful, often used for submixes or zone mixes. Think of a venue with multiple speaker zones needing slightly different feeds, maybe with different EQ or delay.
Right, like lobby speakers, main PA, under balcony fills.
Precisely. Matrices are perfect for that. They can be fed from the O buses or the main buses. Plus, they have 2 extra direct inputs each.
Direct inputs?
Yeah, you can route any input channel directly into a matrix bus, pre or post fader, bypassing the need to go through an O bus first. Very handy for adding just one specific mic into a zone mix, for example.
That direct input seems super useful. The guide also mentions mix-minus using phase inversion for broadcast.
Yep, exactly. A classic broadcast technique. If you have a remote guest, you send them back the main mix minus their own voice. Prevents echoes and feedback. The matrix can do this by phase inverting the guest's channel and mixing it into their feed.
Clever.
And matrix buses can also be routed back into input channels if you need really complex setups. Lots of possibilities.
Wow, okay. The routing is clearly very deep. Let's shift gears to effects. The effects screen controls everything, and it has a load of virtual analog emulation.
Yes, that's a big selling point. Lots of classic gear modeled inside. The guide breaks down the slots. 8 premium FX slots.
Premium?
These can run any effect type in the library, standard ones, STD, or the channel focus ones, CH. Then there are also standard FX slots, which can also run STD and CH effects.
What's special about the CH category?
Those include some clever multi-effect units, like 3 effects packed into one slot for channel processing. And there's a dedicated mastering processor with 4 stages in one CH slot.
Efficient. So how many effects in total?
You can load up to 16 effects devices simultaneously across all those premium and standard slots. Use them as inserts or on sends.
16 slots. That's a lot.
It is. But remember, that doesn't include the dedicated processing on each channel strip. The gate, comp, EQ, and insert points on every input and bus. Those are separate again.
Ah, right. So the 16 FX slots are in addition to all the channel strip processing. That's a ton of power.
It really is.
How do you typically apply these effects? Bus ends versus inserts?
The usual way. Time-based stuff like reverb delay typically use bus ends. You send a bit of the channel to an effects bus, put the reverb on that bus, and return the wet signal to the main mix.
Standard practice.
Whereas inserts are for things you want directly in the signal path, compression, gating, maybe a specific EQ model affecting 100% of that channel or bus signal.
Makes sense. So if I wanted to set up a reverb using a bus send, walk me through it.
Sure. Select your channel first, go to its home screen, find the BUS send section, unmute the send going to the bus you want to use for reverb, and turn up the send level.
Okay, sending signal to the bus.
Then you go to the effects screen, select an available slot, load your chosen reverb into it, and set the input of that effect slot to be fed by the bus you just sent signal to.
Insert the effect on the bus.
Exactly. Insert the effect on the bus. Then finally, make sure that bus itself is routed to your main mix output so you can actually hear the reverb return.
Right. Send from channel, process on bus, return bus to main mix.
Got it. Okay, managing all this complexity must rely heavily on saving and loading the SNAP tab.
Yes, SNAP is for snapshots, capturing the entire state of the console.
Everything. Channels, buses, routing, effects.
Pretty much everything. Channels, auxes, buses, mains, matrices, sources, outputs, DCAs, mute groups, effects settings. A complete picture of your mix.
And just hitting save captures it all.
Yes. But save plus scope is more powerful.
How so?
Scope lets you choose what gets saved. Maybe you only want to save routing changes or just the EQ on the drum channels. When you load a scoped snapshot, only those selected parameters get recalled. Ah, very useful for surgical recalls. Prevents accidentally changing things you didn't mean to.
Precisely. And loading is simple. Just select and hit load. Update overwrites an existing snapshot with current settings. Partial update lets you load just specific bits from a snapshot.
That partial update sounds great for just bringing in, say, the vocal settings from another snapshot.
Exactly. Then there are snippets, or SMPs.
Even smaller recalls.
Yes, much finer grained. Think recalling just a specific compressor setting change, or maybe unmuting a few channels. You hit REC, make your changes, hit S.P. It records just those parameter adjustments.
So snapshots for whole scenes, snippets for tiny tweaks within a scene.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And you can refine snippet content with add remove items. Now that global button top right.
Yeah, what's that for?
Protection. It lets you save certain things, channels, buses, outputs, effects, etc., from being changed when you load any snapshot or snippet.
Like a global safe list?
Exactly. If something is globally protected, a little lock icon lights up red. Essential for keeping your main outputs or maybe guest vocal channels consistent across a show.
Absolute crucial feature. Don't want to accidentally mute the mains.
Definitely not. The guide also mentions HIN for saving you calling individual channel settings, which is straightforward. And then a show W.
What's the show W function?
It's like a master project file. It lets you bundle together snapshots, snippets, audio clips for playback, FX setups, and channel presets, everything you need for a specific event or production into one package.
Ah, so it organizes all the related files for a gig.
Yep, you create a show, then add items to it from internal memory or USB. Keeps everything tidy.
Very useful. Okay, USB again, the front panel port. Besides recording playback and saving loading data?
You can also charge devices, phones, tablets. Pretty handy.
Nice little bonus. And just unplug the drive when the XCS light is off?
That's right. Safe to remove it then. Now there's also the USB MSD access setting in Setup General.
What's that control?
That's for when you connect the rear panel USB port to a computer. You choose what the computer sees. Wing OS mounts the operating system partition. That's for firmware updates.
Okay.
Wing Data mounts the internal storage where all your shows, snapshots, presets are saved. Lets you back them up or transfer them easily.
Right, and eject it properly from the computer first, like any USB drive.
Always good practice to avoid data issues.
So that naturally leads to firmware updates, also done via USB.
Correct. Download the file from Behringer's site. Go to Setup General, enable OS access, connect the rear USB to your computer. The OS drive appears. Just drag the firmware file onto it.
Seems simple enough.
And they suggest removing older firmware files from that drive just to be tidy.
What if something goes wrong? Or it won't boot?
There's recovery mode.
Yeah.
Power off. Connect USB. Hold down the setup button while powering on.
Okay, hold setup during power up.
This should force it into update mode, mounting the OS drive. Then you just drag the firmware file onto the OS drive again. It'll try to boot from the newest valid file it finds there.
Good to know there's a backup plan. Phew.
Okay, I think that covers most of the key points from the Quick Start Guide.
We've definitely covered a lot. Safety, basic operation, the recorders, the very flexible routing, including those internal sources like user signals and patches the bus and matrix system, effects, saving loading snapshots and snippets, USB functions, firmware updates. It gives a really solid overview of what this rack can do.
It really does. And, you know, thinking about it, one thing that really stands out as potentially really creative is that user patch feature.
Yes.
The idea of combining any two inputs, maybe from totally different places, into a stereo or MS pair, that just seems like it opens up some wild sound design possibilities right at the start of the chain.
It absolutely does. It encourages you to think outside the box about your input structures. What weird pairs could you create? What processing could you apply asymmetrically right at the source? It's quite unique.
Makes you want to experiment, doesn't it? For sure. And while this Quick Start Guide gives us a great foundation, The Wing Erase is obviously a deep piece of kit. There's way more under the hood, advanced effects settings, really complex routing possibilities, tons of customization.
Yeah, this is just scratching the surface.
Exactly. The full manual, available online, is definitely the next step for anyone who wants to go deeper. So having gone through this initial overview, what specific part of digital mixers, or maybe the Wing RAC itself, are you now most curious about exploring further?